And welcome to Act One, a Canadian take on news events. I am your host, Gordy Canuck, real name Gordon Causey. And tonight we're going to be talking about anti vax sentiment, and I'm going to be going through my own journey, how my attitudes with respect to vaccinations in general, broadly speaking, have evolved. And I want to make one thing absolutely 100% perfectly clear right off the bat. I am not a medical professional. I do not have the requisite background in medical science research or any such field to be offering anything that could be construed as advice. If I was to be asked for advice, I would tell someone to consult with medical professionals. And I would go further and I would say that quite often in medical science, as in most sciences, there can often be disagreement. And so I would suggest soliciting opinions from both sides of a contentious issue and then to weigh it and come to your own personal choice. I'm not here to tell anyone what to do. The purpose of this video is to elucidate on my own journey, on my own attitudes. I can speak to that. And I hope that the content resonates. I'm curious to see, is this the type of content that YouTube will appreciate? YouTube can boost a video's visibility or they can suppress it. Uh, I don't know if this will get boosted or not, or if it will be suppressed or not. But regardless, I'm going to put it out there. If you think the content is engaging, worthwhile, thought provoking, put whatever parameters on it you wish, then you're welcome to hit like. You can subscribe to the channel. I endeavor to discuss contentious issues a lot of the time. And my views do not always conform to what I will call the mainstream. I often on this channel will say that the media, the legacy mainstream media, in many ways, they are there to program the population, to program us what to think, what to believe, even how to feel about things. And so, what I endeavor to do, especially around contentious issues, is to seek out alternatives, alternative views. I want to get as full a picture as I can. Does that mean I always reach the proper conclusion? Absolutely not. Um, and my views and attitudes can change. But at any rate, I'm fearful. Well, that's the wrong word. I'm not fearful, but I think there's potential that this video could be censored. And I'm going to do my best to tread carefully, as it were. I do not wish to give out medical misinformation. I have had videos taken down for what YouTube has called medical misinformation. Even a video I did where all I simply did was say, check out this individual, check out that individual. And I enumerated a number of recognized experts in the field of medical science and merely suggested to go and seek out their opinions. That was taken down for medical misinformation. I guess I mentioned the wrong names, although it strikes me that now that um, concerns about vaccines in general has gone mainstream enough that YouTube and the tech giants are pulling back on their censorship, and I hope that continues. I did a video recently within the last week or so talking about how the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration of the United States, is now acknowledging for the first time that the COVID vaccines have killed American children. And the FDA is a recognized government medical authority. Food and Drug Administration. So they're a recognized authority. So I imagine it's difficult for YouTube to censor that kind of content. Someone like myself, Joe Nobody, Gordy Canuck, simply giving voice to what's already being said by the US FDA or the Centers for Disease Control or whatever. So let me read what's being said before we get into this. Danny is here, and he's saying that Nancy should be along shortly. Both Nancy and Danny are moderators. They have a little wrench next to their name, and the wrench denotes the fact that they have moderator ability. They can take down messages. I have been spammed in the past. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen from time to time. Danny is writing, guess what? The flu season is back upon us, yet convid, has disappeared just as the flu disappeared in 2020. I don't know that. I don't see COVID being reported on much. Now I'm hearing out of the UK stories of what they are calling super flu, and also the big one, measles. Measles is all over the news lately. And Danny harkens upon something of a theme of this station. My channel, I am a professing Christian, Bible believing Christian. Okay. I know that in today's world, a lot of people look sideways whenever someone professes Jesus is Lord. There's a tendency among some, not all, to go, oh, you're one of those. I would invite you, even if you are in that camp or to any degree whatsoever, I would encourage you to stick around and put up your comments in the live chat as well. But Danny has written, Jesus is forever Lord and King. And King is using the crown emoji. And then he goes on to say that as of 2025, the FDS is putting a black box warning on all COVID vaccines. I think you mean FDA, the highest warning they have for the medical world for dangers. Yeah, FDA, not FDS. Typos. The S and the A are right beside each other on the keyboard. Easy to make mistakes. At any rate, I'm in the process of writing a piece for my Patreon on this topic. And what I've written so far is that there is a lot of debate ranging over vaccines currently, and that this isn't new. Arguments over the effectiveness, safety of vaccines, that's been going on for a long time. But I would argue that previously anti-vax sentiment was kind of background noise. You had to seek it out. But now it strikes me that it is much more mainstream. And what we're being told is that cases of measles are rising significantly. I think in the US, they're up in and around 14,000. I may have that number wrong. And I think it's 1,000 plus in Canada. And that's a disease, measles. It was said that it had been eradicated and that it's now making a comeback. And that's according to medical officials being quoted in the media. And the reason for the resurgence, the reason we're being told is because of vaccine hesitancy and outright anti-vax sentiment. My own attitudes toward vaccines have evolved over the past 5 or 6 years, and longer than that, but the big change has happened in the last 5 or 6. And again, I want to make it again perfectly crystal clear. I'm not putting out anything here that is to be construed as advice of any kind, medical or otherwise. I'm just sharing the influences that have shaped my own changing opinions. So prior to 2020, prior to the COVID insanity, I never really gave vaccines much thought. I've had pretty much all of them. I've had MMR, polio, DTaP, or tetanus, hepatitis. The only vaccine that I never got before COVID was the annual flu shot. Of course, I was at an age, for a long time, I've been at an age where I wasn't really part of the demographic group for whom flu shots are strongly encouraged. I wanted to I brought out, this is my immunization record, my travel immunization record from my time with the Canadian Armed Forces. And you can see Canadian Forces Health Services Center and the base I was last listed at. And it has a list of my immunizations, inoculations, polio. So I got that one. MMR2, the DTaP, which is diphtheria, tetanus, and Hertzitis. I can't even pronounce it. Hepatitis A, hepatitis B. Another word I can't pronounce. Meningococcal meningitis. Got that one. And there are a couple on the back page that I got. When it came to the varicella or varicella chickenpox vaccine, they wrote, member has contacted varicella as a child, varicella vaccine not required. This idea of previous infection conferring immunization. And then there was one thing here saying tuberculin skin test. And it said that questionnaire completed, TST 2 steps not required. And anti-malarial medication. And it says terminal primaquine or primaquine, glucose 6P, and deshydrogenase. And some of this because I spent time in serving in Quebec. Some of it is in French. Let's see what's being written. Got whale oil beef has shown up. Nancy is now here. Everyone's saying hi to each other. Whale is running at 2 times speed to catch up. Danny is writing that he has been anti-vax since 1992. During, I guess there was a high school meningitis scare, and writing, and then in all caps, he says, now I know better. And that today he would say no. And again, just to put a fine point on things, nothing on this channel, either said by me or in the live chat, should be construed by anyone watching as medical advice. Whale is writing that he was in the drugstore today and the PA system was inviting him to schedule an appointment. And my employer, I work retail now. I left the military in June of 2021. And in early 2022, I started working at a retail establishment that has the voiceovers. And one of them says that the best way to avoid flu, and one of the best ways, doesn't say the best, says one of the best ways to avoid the flu for yourself and others is to get the annual flu shot, which I have not. And Danny goes on to say, with respect to varicella, and this is my service, immunization record from when I was in the military. And it said that because I was exposed as a child, not required. So it says, let me find that page. Where is it? No, not that one. Member stated has contracted varicella as a child. Varicella vaccine not required. And I'm fairly confident in saying check me on this, but I'm pretty sure varicella is the Latin type name for what is more commonly referred to as chickenpox. And I got it. I got it when I was kindergarten age, around age 5, spots all over my body. But at any rate, Danny was writing, funny how herd immunity existed for millennia. Yet all of a sudden, in 2020, herd immunity had vanished, no longer exists. And this idea that immunity from prior infection, at least for chickenpox, was considered sufficient. But then 2020 came along and you could not escape the mandates. If you had an employer requiring you to roll up your sleeve in order to continue your employment, you we're not allowed to say, well, I already had COVID, and so I have been immunized. I've been immunized by prior infection, which is what the health officials with the Canadian Armed Forces told me when they were determining whether or not I needed the chickenpox vaccine. Oh, you've had chickenpox, you don't need this one. And I even saw Anthony Fauci on a mainstream media broadcast before the COVID era being asked by a media personality, was asking, saying, I have a friend, a family member, a colleague, something who has been infected with, has already gotten the flu. Do they need the flu vaccine? And Anthony Fauci wanted to be very clear. He said, if your friend, colleague, if this person has had the flu, if it is indeed the flu, then they do not need the vaccine. In that interview, Anthony Fauci said that prior infection is the best form of immunization. Your body has been exposed. Let me get back to what I was writing on my Patreon piece. Uh, Prior to 2020, I didn't give vaccines a lot of thought because I've had, as I just enumerated, pretty much all of them, and but I never did get the annual flu shot because I was never really in the demographic. But I do remember very well there was a news story that came out, and the government of Ontario, which is where I live, the province of Ontario in Canada, largest province in this country. If you're not familiar with Canadian geography, Canadian civics, um, Ontario province where you find Toronto. Anyway, the Ontario government was trying to mandate that as they mandated that paramedics were required to get the annual flu shot, and the Canadian Medical Association Journal, CM, the CMAJ, they wrote an article on it. It was dated March 19, 2020. Paramedics face dismissal for refusing flu shots. And the paramedics challenged this requirement, and they actually won the right to refuse the shots if they wished. And this was probably the start of my vaccine hesitancy. Basically, I would call it a seed being planted. At that time in 2002, I would have been 36. Um, and I remember it was out there. People would suggest, you really should get the flu shot. But the way I looked at it is that paramedics back then and now, they have a lot more medical training, medical knowledge than I had then or now. And if they were opposed to being forced to take an inoculation like a flu shot, well, I thought at the time, maybe they know things that I don't. And again, I was 36 or so. Even back then and now, I rarely go to the doctor. So it's not like I was having the flu shot pushed on me. And in fact, I still rarely go to the doctor. The last time I saw a doctor was when I was leaving the military, when I was getting my release in eventually, I left in June of 2021, but before you go out, you have to jump through all kind of hoops. One of them was to have a thorough medical exam. So that's the last time I saw a doctor would have been early 2021. Uh, and Denny's I'm going to redact a little of what you're saying because I don't want to get into trouble. But Danny is of the opinion that the flu vaccine, the annual flu vaccine, is he describes it as, I'm not going to use the word. But this part, they base it on what strain may appear. My understanding, and again, not medical advice, my understanding is that May, June, in and around that window of time, medical health authorities make a best guess as to what strain they think will be the dominant strain in the coming flu season. The flu season typically runs October to March, April, in that window. So, April, May, June, somewhere around there, health authorities try to make a guesstimation which strain of the flu is going to dominate the flu season come October. And then that is what they put into the flu shot. And they will tell, I've read articles enough on it to state with some degree of certainty, although I, again, check everything I say, that some years they guess well and they say that the flu shot is very efficacious, but in other times they don't match up well with the prevalent dominant strain and it's less efficacious. Many will be aware of a very recent Cleveland clinic. This is, you got the Mayo Clinic, you got the MD Anderson Cancer Center, the Cleveland Clinic. It's a world renowned medical facility. And they came out with a study just recently that pointed to the flu vaccine as having been negative efficacious, meaning, and I don't know whether that was last year's flu season or the flu season from the year before, but basically that individuals who got the annual flu shot in that year were actually more likely to have contracted influenza than those who did not get the flu shot. So, uh, and I think in this respect, at least if we accept the mainstream narrative and the predominating, you know, words coming out of the medical health authorities, in this respect, I think, what they're saying is somewhat reasonable. Sometimes they guess right, sometimes they guess wrong. What's going to be the dominant strain? It's April, May, June now. What's it going to be in October? We don't know, but we think it's going to be this one. At any rate, let's plow on. Uh, Danny's asking how you can make a flu shot for an unpredictable flu variant. It doesn't make sense to him. What they will tell you is that sometimes they guess well, and that they see what variants are circulating in April, May, June, and then maybe they model it out, computer model simulation to determine which one they think will be the most dominant. And I believe they can include more than one strain in an annual flu shot. But then a new variant emerges. Oh, we didn't think that one would dominate, and it's dominating. That's why so many people are getting sick. That might be the excuse for why the Cleveland Clinic did a study showing that getting the flu shot actually increased, according to their research, the people who got the flu shot were more prone to get sick with the flu than those who did not. Anyway, um, and Nancy is writing that she is allergic to eggs. And that is from what I understand, eggs are a common element used to culture vaccines. And so, uh, and Nancy's saying that the flu shot is they use eggs to create the vaccines. I'm not a vaccinologist. I think that should be pretty clear. And now Whale is writing that in late 2020, Dr. Andrew Kaufman did a video interview with RFB, Richie from Boston. Okay, it's going to be a podcast. And identified that the isolation study was using an image of an exosome naturally occurring. I'm not sure what that's in relation to. And Danny says he has a copy of that video. Eat Me is writing that during the swine flu scare, they forced U.S. nurses to take the jab. They had to retract that policies because nurses were quitting in masses. I know that in and around, I believe it was during the Ford administration in the United States. Ford was the president after Richard Nixon, and there was a swine flu scare, outbreak, pandemic, and epidemic, whatever the case, and they rushed out a swine flu vaccine. You can find a 60 minutes interview from that era where they were talking to a woman who it caused severe motor function difficulties. I don't want to say she was paralyzed, but there seemed to be some paralytic component to what happened. And I believe that, at least within the context of that 60 minutes interview, there was little to no doubt raised as to what had caused her severe condition. It was the swine flu vaccine that had been rushed through at warp speed. Uh, Anyway, Danny goes on to say, if you want the truth on YouTube, just look for all the videos or creators that were banned. They only ban the truth. They do not ban lies. And uh, Wales giving Danny a big check mark, as in right on. Uh, and Nancy is highly allergic to eggs, so she knows that's the word I was looking for before. Cultured, I believe that is the word. She's saying that the flu vaccine is cultured in eggs, and I have read that before myself. That some vaccines are cultured in eggs, and that there are alternatives sometimes for individuals who are allergic to eggs. But anyway, just wanted to get on to how my own attitudes evolved and what I've learned about vaccination. Prior to 2005, if you would ask me what does it mean to be vaccinated, I would have said that you were receiving either live or dead virus. The way I would have equated it is it's basically showing your immune system. It's almost like criminology in a fashion where the police go around showing a picture of a suspect to everyone and to see, have you seen this individual before? And also to let them know, if you see this individual, be careful, look out, armed and dangerous, that kind of thing. And that, in a sense, is a bit of a metaphor. The vaccine is basically showing a snapshot of of a viral pathogen to your immune system so that your immune system is prepared. So if a wild version of the virus, if you come into contact with it, your immune system is ready, willing, and able to deal with it. It has developed antibodies. That was my understanding of vaccines, very low level. Since that time, what I've learned is that the first vaccines, or the first vaccine, centered around smallpox, and it involved, and this gets a little graphic in detail, but smallpox, incredibly devastating disease from a bygone era. And back then, vaccination was not a matter of being injected with a hypodermic, no syringe, no needle. Instead, what they would do is take someone already infected with smallpox and take what they call a pustule or a postulate, the little bumps like an acne sore or whatever you want to call it. Take that and burst it, and then take something like a thread, run it through the postulate, the pus, and then open a vein and introduce it to you in that fashion. And apparently, from what I've read, and I was reading an article just earlier today on this, and it was published through the National Institutes of Health website through their PubMed portal on the internet. And National Institute of Health, that's Anthony Fauci's, that used to be his organization. And um, from what I understand, that form of vaccination, variolation, they called it, I believe, that form of vaccination would result in deaths, like 3 out of 100 or something like that. People still died from it. However, that was exponentially lower. It was 20 plus dying from natural infection. So even though there was a risk of death, the risk of death seemed to be much lower by introducing it rather than being exposed wildly. But then, uh, I believe it was in England, it had long been remarked that milkmaids had incredibly beautiful complexions when compared to the broader population. To have the complexion of a milkmaid, that was another way of saying you were beautiful. And the reason for this comparison is because so many people were infected with smallpox and it would leave pock marks on their faces, like a bad acne infection or a bad case of acne will lead someone to scarring on their face. Same idea, and I think even worse with smallpox, uh, disfigurement and pot marks and ugly. But milkmaids were somehow found to have been immune to smallpox. They were being infected with something called cowpox. And cowpox apparently is from the same family as smallpox. And however, cowpox was far less lethal than smallpox, and the lesions wouldn't be on your face, it would be on your hands and arms. And so an enterprising doctor took I believe, a child and went through this variolation process of taking a milkmaid or someone who suffered from a small, or rather, a cowpox infection and infected something like a thread with the postulate from a cowpox infection and infected a young boy with cowpox. The child developed cowpox, but then was later found or determined to have been immune to smallpox because on numerous subsequent occasions, the child was exposed to individuals suffering from smallpox and never got infected. And so, this idea of cross immunity, if you're immune to cowpox, well, then you've developed immunity to cowpox and to smallpox. And so, this kind of informed my idea as to the manner in which vaccinations worked. However, since the COVID era, I've learned so much more. The word adjuvant was not in my vocabulary prior to COVID. If you'd said to me, what is an adjuvant? I would have had no idea. Now I know from reading uh, and from interviews with doctors and vaccinologists and experts in the field that adjuvants are compounds, things that are added to vaccines to stimulate the immune system to improve the response. And I further learned that there are elements like aluminum or in the family of aluminum, and that in generations previous that it had been mercury, and that even to this day there is a compound that's akin to mercury, but it's at a much lower level than what it used to be. And it makes me wonder, given the fact that, I got my first vaccines would have been late 60s, early 70s. I wonder how much mercury I had injected into my body. And what are the long-term effects? That's a big question. I don't know what the incidence was of things like dementia and Alzheimer's in previous generations. I know it's much higher now. We all know about autism and the manner in which it has exploded over the past few decades. I think they're saying now in the United States that it's something like 1 in 33 children is diagnosed as being placed somewhere on the autism spectrum. And that is autism can be a devastating illness. I find there's a tendency now in the mainstream media where autism is being promoted as almost something of a superpower. You have, a TV show about a young doctor who's autistic, and you have another woman. I don't watch TV, so I haven't seen these shows. I've seen clips of them when scrolling through my social media feeds, and people will share clips of these shows of these autistic superheroes. And I have seen suggestions that anyone who speaks out or talks about the need to eliminate autism, that it's construed and it's thrown back at them as if, what, you don't like autistic kids, you hate autistic kids. What? No, who could hate an autistic child? Who could hate a child who's, suffering from a disease like from a condition like autism? I don't know whether to call it a disease or a condition, to be honest. I think condition is probably the more appropriate term. Uh, and I've got a new name here that I haven't seen before. Mad Musician Magician is writing, I'm immune to the bubonic plague because I got cold sores to cold sores. So the herpes is factually known to provide immune. I had not heard that one before. Do know that cold sores that a lot of people get, I believe, is called herpes simplex 1, and that genital herpes is I believe, and again, verify anything I say, is referred to as herpes simplex 2. And that, but I didn't know that herpes simplex 1 or 2, that they are in the family of the bubonic plague, the Black Death. But learn something new every day. I'll have to look into that. Uh, and then Nancy's saying something about Timo is the name of something. I don't want to scroll back. I've missed too many messages. Lots of people chiming in, and I really appreciate it. Let me know where you're from, if you don't mind. Always good to. Now, musician magician is writing that in the Philippines, my uncle seen a guy get wrapped in a bubble when they found out he had COVID down at the hospital. Uh, he was shooketh. Seems a weird word, shooketh, but whatever the case. Um, are you in the Philippines yourself? Are you Filipino? If you're Filipino, I will say, "Cómo está, pare?" That's you got a good chunk of my Tagalog vocabulary. All I know in Filipino and Tagalog, there's more than one language in the Philippines, but as I understand it, the predominating language is Tagalog, and I know "Cómo está, mare?" "Cómo está, pare?" "Cómo está," or rather, salama is thank you, and walongo naman, that's you're welcome. There, you just got my Filipino vocabulary. Nancy's writing what I said earlier about some adjuvants that they contain. One of the adjuvants used is some form of aluminum. I was just reading on it, but they have a different name for it, a more scientific, technical name. They don't just say aluminum, but it's in that family. It's a form of aluminum. And so I want to get on to why I won't be I did not get the COVID vaccine, because now all of a sudden now I start reading about adjuvants. And I was already a little bit skeptical of vaccines due to the annual flu shot. And then I saw the COVID vaccines rush through at warp speed. And over the last 20, 30 years, I have invested in the stock market, and I have invested at times in biotech, in pharmaceutical companies. And so I learned some things. One of the things I learned is about the clinical trial process. Found a website called clinicaltrials.gov, and it's the US government repository website for whenever there's a clinical trial, you can read about it, pardon the cough, at clinicaltrials.gov. And you can see when a company has a drug, a compound, an agent that they're proposing to the FDA, and they do, before it gets to clinical trial, they do work in the lab. Then they often do animal studies, right? Mice, rats, lemurs, whatever. And then if all that goes well, then they do a phase 1. And the phase 1 trial is all about safety. And if the phase 1 goes well, they wrap it up, they pour over the results, and then they design a phase 2. And then the FDA says, okay, we'll look at your phase 2 proposal, we'll get back to you. And then if all goes well, they'll conduct that phase 2 trial. And phase 2 trials are most commonly about efficacy, about determining whether or not the agent, drug, pharmaceutical product does what the investigators believe it will do. We want to reduce cholesterol. We want to improve heart health. We want to improve circulation, whatever. Does it do what you proposed? And a lot of times, drugs that in the clinical development stage, they find out that it doesn't do what they thought it would do. They find out it does something else beneficial or it has a different outcome. I believe that's how Viagra it came to the market. I think it was originally proposed as a drug for another purpose, and they found out, well, whenever people take this drug, men get aroused. Hey, we got a boner pill. And I sometimes wonder if that's how they came up with the drug that they came out for RLS, restless leg syndrome, because many will probably remember there are a lot of ads on television talking about, do you have trouble sleeping? Do your legs shake? Well, there's this name for it now, restless leg syndrome. And our drug, we have a drug for it. But whatever the case. So phase two is about efficacy. And then if that goes well, if it if the drug does if the results show it doing what it is believed it would do, then those results are poured over, and then a phase three trial is designed, submitted to the FDA, and the FDA pores over it. And if all goes well, then a large phase three trial, which is typically a much larger population of patients or clinical trial participants, small number in phase one, bigger number in phase two. The largest number is in phase three because phase three is designed to get regulatory approval to have your drug approved as safe and effective. And this process, commonly 10 years from the point where a drug starts being worked on in the lab until it gets to a completed phase three and receives approval. We're talking on average, typically about a 10-year process. And the thought when the COVID vaccines came out that it could be redacted down to just a few short months didn't, for me personally, did not pass the smell test. And one of the biggest concerns I had was over the fact that there was no long-term safety profile, given the fact that this mRNA platform, they'd been working on it for 20 years, but it had never yielded a viable product. No mRNA product had ever found its way into the marketplace. And so I'm like, yeah, and you only worked on this for a few months. You started like in February, March, and by December of the same year, you're giving an emergency use, interim use authorization. Pass. I'll wait. My attitude was, and I had this conversation many times. I said, I will wait. I know a lot of people, probably most of the population is taking it, and I'll see what the outcomes are. And very quickly, I found out that everyone I knew getting the shots was still getting sick with COVID anyway. So, my understanding of immunization, I mean, again, this is my travel immunization record. It's what it says on my immunization. What does it mean to be immunized? And my low level, non scientific, no PhD understanding of the word immunization means that you are immune, meaning you do not get what you have been immunized against. I've had the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine. I've never had measles, mumps, or rubella. Now, I also know the old bromide, the old maxim within medical or science in general, correlation does not prove causation. So simply because I got the MMR vaccine, is that the reason why I never got measles, mumps, rubella? I can't state it empirically, but It certainly is a very strong correlation. In point of fact, I don't know a single person who's been inoculated against measles, mumps, and rubella who got measles, mumps, and rubella. So to me, immunization, I'm immune. Likewise, I don't know anyone immunized against polio who got polio. And yet with COVID, everyone I knew getting the COVID jabs was still getting sick with COVID anyway. So I'm like, okay. So it's I viewed it as the non-immunizing immunization, the vaccine that doesn't vaccinate. Because my understanding of the word vaccination was a substance, injected typically into your body to render you immune. It's what I thought vaccines did. They rendered you immune, but not the COVID jab. But now we're into this, we're into there's a lot of hesitancy about vaccines, not just the COVID, but generally speaking. And apparently, vaccine rates are dropping significantly. And now they're saying that measles is rampaging. We have outbreaks of measles happening. 14,000, I believe, is the number of cases in the US, over 1,000 in Canada. The US is poised to lose its status as having eradicated measles, and it's because of those horrible anti vaxxers. Well, the question I want to ask is this. I did some reading on a Harvard School of Medicine page on the internet, and was curious to know how many people would die of measles prior to vaccines coming out. And the number that I saw generated when I did my Google search and they used a Harvard source was up to up to 3 per 1,000, up to 3 per 1,000. On reading further, they were saying it's between 1 and 3 per 1,000. So we're talking, less than 1%. And then the question I always want to ask when I hear about someone having an adverse outcome, be it from whatever the cause, even if it's COVID, you would be told that someone died of COVID. Others have said this individual died after getting the vaccine. What I want to know is what was their health situation prior to the event, prior to getting the jab, prior to getting the disease. And again, it's this old causational, correlational dichotomy that you have. Is it correlation or is it causation? Someone got measles and they died. Did measles cause their death? And that's just an open question on my part. I want to know the health condition of the child who is said to have died of measles. Were they suffering from were they severely immunocompromised? Did they have a very poorly functioning immune system to begin with? And then the question I would ask, springing from that, if I were to find out that yes, well, they were severely immunocompromised, then I would ask, okay, so even if they had not contracted measles, what are the chances they would have contracted? I mean, there are pathogens floating around all the time. There's streptococcus, there's bacterial infections. There's all kinds of things. Our bodies are constantly being confronted with bacteria, with viruses, with pathogens, and you can't Purell the world. And so, if an individual had not died of measles, would they have died of something else because of their being perhaps immunocompromised? Open question. I don't have the answer. What I find annoying is that so often when medical authorities come out and they want to tell you that this individual, and I've used this example way too many times when I'm going to do it again, Alberta, the year 2021, October, they came out and they said that a 14-year-old child had died of COVID. And that sets the narrative. Oh my gosh, it furthers the deadly coronavirus. Look, a 14-year-old kid. Oh my gosh. What they didn't divulge was the fact that the child was already suffering from stage 4 inoperable brain cancer and was in a palliative care setting in end of life care because they knew the child was not going to live. And yet they put his death in the COVID column, had a big press conference over it. And it was only because the child's family went public and said, our child, this boy did not die of COVID. He had stage 4 inoperable brain cancer. And then it came out, and then the chief medical officer of health for the province of Alberta, a woman by the name of Dina Hinshaw, then she gave a second press conference and said, well, we made a mistake. It was an error in judgment. But during the first press conference, when Dina Hinshaw announced it as having been a COVID death, she did state that the child had underlying health issues. So it strikes me that she would have been well aware of the child's health condition. And my attitude, my opinion, is that this was the weaponization of the death of a child in order to sell a pharmaceutical product, the COVID vaccine for kids. And I thought that was just grotesque. And anyway, let me read on what's being written. I haven't been paying much attention to the live chat, not as much as I normally do. And Danny's expressing the opinion, which I have seen debunked, and I often question whether when they say they debunk things, I don't really think they have, but he's saying they've changed the definition of what as to what a vaccine is in order to include. That's a commonly held view, and it's actually one I share. My understanding of vaccines forever. And the definition I read was that a causative agent introduced to the system in order to produce immunity. And now the definition is an agent, substance, a product introduced into the system to generate an immunological response. So long as your immune system responds, now it qualifies as a vaccine. Well, you can't call something an immunization if you're still expected to get sick from it. Now they just say, well, you would have gotten sicker. It would have been worse. Well, how do you know? How can you possibly know how sick an individual would have gotten had they not had the vaccine, unless you have access to the multiverse and you can inoculate one person and not the other. And then, in my way of thinking, you cannot know. Mad Musician is writing something about the fact that they have changed song lyrics as well. I'm obviously missing some of your earlier conversation. And then Danny's writing that over 95%, this is his statistic. I haven't seen this myself. Over 95% of smokers never got COVID, even if they didn't get the jab, not because nicotine has counter effects. And I've talked about that extensively on this channel before. Anyone who wants to look into it, just look up the smoker's paradox. It was recognized very early in cities like London, Paris, Rome, New York City, large population centers. The doctors were amazed. They were expecting to see smokers overrepresented in ICU or, going into the emergency department, suffering from severe COVID, severe respiratory distress. And they found smokers were almost completely absent. Where are the smokers? They weren't there. And it led to papers being written on the smoker's paradox and the speculation that nicotine might have a prophylactic or preventative effect from keeping someone from getting sick. And specifically, I heard it suggested that nicotine might coat the ACE2 receptor on the cell and that's where the spike protein, almost like a docking of a space station, the spike protein, I'll say metaphorically, docks onto the ACE2 receptor, and that's how it enters into the cell. And the suggestion was nicotine could be providing a coating over that ACE2 receptor that prevents the spike protein from latching on to the ACE2 receptor. And anyway, let's go on. Mad Musician is writing that I've read in the French journal that nicotine binds to, there we go, that receptors that COVID can't latch onto because the nicotine you ingest is already bound to the receptors. I was talking off the top before I read, but I've said it many times, and it's, I think, pretty much publicly, it's in the public domain, in the public sphere. And Danny's seen it as well. He's read the same paper. Wales writing, with regard to mRNA, Luc Montagnier identified antibody dependency enhancement, ADE, then he passed. Now, Dr. Luc Montagnier, I don't recall him speaking about ADE specifically. The first individual I recall bringing that up was Dr. Geert Vanden Bossche, a guy who, when they would have world conferences on vaccines, he would be a keynote speaker. This is a guy who worked at GSK, Novartis. He headed up programs for Gavi, which is the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunizations, Gavi. He worked at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in their vaccine development program. So Dr. Geert Vanden Bossche is not an anti-vaxxer. He spent his entire career in the vaccine industry pretty much. However, his contention at the beginning was that introducing a mass vaccination program while a viral pathogen is circulating widely would invite evolutionary pressure on the virus, and the virus would eventually adapt and overcome. That the vaccine generated antibodies, that because the vaccine is, or rather because SARS-CoV-2 is being spread around so much, that it's going to put pressure on the virus itself, and the virus will adapt and overcome, and we'll see an explosion of variants, is what he predicted. We're going to see an alphabet soup of variants coming at us. And he contended that it was going to happen because of a mass vaccination program. And McGill University in Canada, one of Canada's leading medical schools, came out with a paper, and it was called The Doomsday Scenario of Dr. Geert Vanden Bossche, about this explosion in variants. And they basically, what was nice about the article is they at least acknowledged that Dr. Geert Vanden Bossche was qualified to offer an expert opinion. But they then said that they suggested in their paper that this was just him capitalizing, making a name for himself by being a lightning rod for all the people who are vaccine hesitant and anti-vax. And then Geert Vanden Bossche turned out to be right. We got Omicron and we got the alphabet soup. And what he said turned out, it actually happened. The doomsday scenario came true. And we had Omicron came, and that should have vindicated him, but it didn't. Anyway, Dr. Luc Montagnier came onto my radar early in the pandemic because he was one of the first, and maybe the first, to crash on this bogus origin story that, it was a bat to human interaction in a wet market in Wuhan, China, that caused this SARS-CoV-2 virus to jump from a bat to a human. That was the origin story. And Dr. Luc Montagnier, a Nobel Prize winning virologist from France, went public and said that he'd examined, the virus, after the Chinese released the sequence, and he studied it, and he said this could not have occurred in nature. This is the product of a lab. This is showing gain of function, directed evolution, call it whatever you want, that it has been manipulated by in a lab. And he was censored, maligned, deplatformed, the whole drill because he wasn't going with the prescribed narrative. Now, of course, we know that hardly anyone is still latching on to this bogus, lab, or rather this bogus wet market back to human stuff. Anyway, um, and Luc Montagnier died, yes, but the man was in his 90s. And I think it's a stretch, people do die. And, when someone gets into their 90s, when someone gets into their 80s, I tend to think I'll even say they're playing on the house's money. So anyway, um, so was he, I'm not going down that conspiracy rabbit hole. Uh, and then Mad Musician is going on to say, what if they nearly forced mass immunization? Uh, oh, there's a Simpsons episode where Homer starts spreading conspiracy theories online, and no problems until he comes out with uh, a conspiracy theory that the annual flu shot there's a Simpsons episode that the annual flu shot is designed to bring about heightened consumerism. And Mad Musician is talking about lobotomization, lobotomies. And I'm not, I have to tread carefully, Mad Musician, and everyone. I have to tread carefully. Uh, and Danny's expressing the view that the whole point was basically just to see how far they could push and push and push before people got their back up so that they would have a better idea for future uh, endeavors. And Whale is talking about the fact that we have 8 billion people on this planet, and there's a large, when you go to the World Economic Forum, I wonder how many people attending events at the World Economic Forum in Davos on their nice little campus there. I wonder how many people think 8 billion is too many, and that do we need less? I saw Ted Turner being interviewed by Charlie Rose, and he was saying we're too many people. And I think back then it was only 5 or 6. Too many people. Too many people chasing too few resources, selling this idea of scarcity. There's not enough to go around. Lifeboat ethics, Malthusian worldview. Not enough to go around. Not my view. Uh, Wales writing. Oh wait, Mad's writing. My grandma was shook when she saw a commercial, and it went like this: "Why wait in line? Come get your liver today." She was dumbfounded by that, and so was I. Uh, Terrifying seeing that advertised on TV. I've never seen anything like that, but then I don't watch TV. Uh, and then Whale went on to say, springing off that body parts, big biz. Don't put donor on your driver's license, makes you dispensable. Reminds me of I think it's a Monty Python. So much of Monty Python came true. I mean, look, many will remember Life of Brian in the Forum, a little arena scene where Stan wants to be called Loretta because he wants to have babies. And then there's the meaning of life, where they show you a child being born, they wave the baby in front, and the mother asks, "Is it a boy or a girl?" And the John Cleese, as the doctor, says something to the effect of, "I think it's a little early to be imposing gender roles, don't you?" And then there was another episode of Monty Python I saw where an individual opens his door to find an ambulance outside with a couple medical guys, and they say, "You signed your organ donation card?" And the guy's like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Good. We're taking your liver." Well, wait, I'm still alive. Yeah, well, too bad. And they conduct the surgery right there. I'm sure you can find it. Uh, my attitude previously had been, with respect to my organs or whatever, is that after I pass, if you can find anything that can still be used, go for it. Anything beyond that, if you want to study it in medical research, if you want to, kinesiologists, kinesiology students will be given parts of a hand to show how the ligaments and everything work. Hey, go nuts. And then I told my family, I said, if there's anything left after that, a garbage tag is like $3, $4. Put me at the side of the road. A lot cheaper than a burial. Um, because my attitude is I won't need be you I won't need my body anymore. Just my own personal view. But getting back to things, I'm going to continue to write out what I've been writing on my Patreon account. I want to kind of tie these thoughts together because it goes deeper. It goes deeper with respect to my views regarding the medical profession in general, and how the pharmaceutical industry is a profit driven industry, profit driven, just like, say, the tobacco industry, just like oil and gas. These are profit driven industries, all of them, pharma, phar, pharmacological, oil and gas, energy exploration, tobacco. And in the case of the tobacco companies, they were able to conduct research that proved, they said, it's been proven that cigarettes are beneficial, that they're the healthy cigarette. I think that was at one or more of the tobacco companies used to claim that they're, cigarette doctor recommended, whatever brand. And there was big money in it. People understand that. They go, okay, yeah, they did it because of the profit motive. And then we had the oil and gas industry attempting to show that, oil exploration, things like the oil sands in Alberta, that this is not environmentally damaging. Really. And a- I remember seeing Petro-Canada advertising environmentally friendly gasoline. Environmentally friendly. Now, and I was like, what? Like maybe you could say doesn't cause as much damage as other types of gasoline, but environmentally friendly. But it was marketing. And if you're a pharmacy, if you're big pharma, and if you can get a product onto being mandated, well, your kids can't go to school unless they get this shot and every other shot. That is the perfect business model. It's ideal because you have a captive market who are required to purchase your product, and they have no choice. It's a money printing machine. And now that we have RFK Jr. And giving voice to so many of them, like Dr. James Redfield, a virologist who used to be head of the CDC. His voice is now being amplified thanks to RFK Jr. Guys like Dr. Luc Montagnier, guys like Dr. Geert Vanden Bosch, guys like, countless, Dr. Michael Yeadon, Dr. Byron Bridle here in Canada, Dr. Ryan Cole. I'm sure you guys could fill up the chat and the comment field down below with the name. There are countless doctors out there. Dr. Robert Malone, who have, you know, worked in places like the Salk Institute, where you don't go working at the Salk Institute unless you're you got to be a genius or damn near to work there. And Dr. Byron Bridle was considered one of Canada's leading experts on vaccines. The Ontario government, Ministry of Health, paid his lab at Guelph University hundreds of thousands of dollars because they wanted his expert opinion on the vaccines under development back then. The Barrington Declaration has thousands of doctors have signed it with respect to the COVID vaccines. And so now these voices are being amplified because of Robert Kennedy. Robert Kennedy is not a doctor, he's a lawyer. There's only been the HHS, Health and Human Services, that department, that portfolio in the US government over its entire history. There have only been one or two doctors who ever headed it up. Usually it's a political position. And that makes sense because the politics involved in the healthcare system are massive. It's as political as it is about medicine, I would argue. Uh, anyway, let's wrap up. But I will be publishing a video more concise, maybe 10, 15 minutes long, where I'll expound on this. It'll be some repeat, but I'll invite you to watch it when it comes out. It'll be an uploaded video, not live, but just going to read up. Danny's saying that cigarettes aren't good for your health, but nicotine, he is saying, is. Nicotine, from what I've read, occurs naturally in tomatoes, in eggplant, in peppers, and likely some other foods as well. However, it's in tobacco that nicotine is at its highest levels. But there's nicotine is a naturally occurring compound. When you smoke cigarettes, though, and I am a smoker, uh, yeah, the paper I have heard has negative health impacts, and also the tobacco is, herbicides, pesticides, this drug, that drug, and it's been suggested that, the drugs were added to the tobacco to make it more addictive. Would not shock me in the least. Profit motive. Um, and then Wales saying, reminds me, as kids, we used to have candy cigarettes. We loved playing that part. No one I know is a smoker today. Okay, well, you know me kind of just online. Um, much like cap guns, point and shoot. No one in his jail that he knows of. Yeah, I had cap guns when I was a kid too. Uh, anyway, so Danny's saying the problem is not the nicotine in the tobacco, it's the 599 chemicals or whatever number it happens to be. There are a lot. Uh, and Danny says that they put a flame retardant to the paper because some dumb, what, fell asleep and burnt his house down. Goodness knows. Anyway, thank you for watching. I don't know whether I should actually be called an anti-vaxxer, but I don't care. Um, I know that I won't be getting it now that I've learned about adjuvants, about the increase in cases of Alzheimer's and whatever. I know I won't be getting a flu shot anytime soon, especially after that Cleveland Clinic study showing, one flu season, more people who got the flu shot got flu than those who didn't get the flu shot. It was negative efficiency, negative efficacy. But at any rate, haven't delved too much into my spiritual faith-based thoughts. Uh, that's a component of this as well, but I could go on probably for hours. Simple fact of the matter is, uh, life when we try to eliminate a harm in the near term, I think we don't look far enough down the road to see the potential for other harms. All we're concerned with is the harm right in front of our face, and we don't look down the road. And so Measles cases are exploding. That's what they're trying to tell us. But I remember back in the, Brady Bunch episode, Peter came home and, "What are you doing home from school?" "I got the measles." "Measles?" "Yeah, that's what they said." "No, you are running a fever." He goes, "Yeah, 99.3, they told me." "All right, go up to bed." And then next thing you know, all 6 of the Brady kids are in bed, they're playing Monopoly or some board game. All the kids are going, "Boy, if you're gonna get sick, measles is the way to go. Measles is great." And that's the way the media portrayed measles before. Uh, no alarmism, but then, back then, there wasn't a pharmaceutical product worth, I don't know how much, money is generated annually from vaccines. I imagine it's in the billions. And so now drive fear. Oh my gosh. And, you know, if 1 in 1,000, 3 in 1,000 children die from measles infections, one question I have is, are these children, what is their health condition like? Prior, were they already severely immunocompromised and would be prone to any number of things? And secondly, what studies have been done on the long-term effects with a genuine placebo, not another vaccine, but an actual inert sugar pill, saline solution, inert placebo? Because from what I understand, MMR uptake is something like 98%. So how do you do a meaningful comparison when you have such a small placebo group? And these are questions that have led me to have anti-vax sentiments. So maybe you think I'm crazy, maybe not. Let me know what you think in the comment field down below. Uh, And Danny's telling me to wear the title, anti-vaxxer, proudly. And Whale saying, no, not anti-vaxxer, but studied, of the unbrainwashed versus compliant who watch TV as a religion. And it's funny, there's a guy on Twitter. His name is Neil Stone, and I don't know who he is, but it's a confirmed account. He says he's an infectious disease doctor, clinician, scientist, officially the first person to use the word COVID. All right. Strictly my personal views. Do not DM me for medical advice, which I never would do anyway. But he is on something of a pro vaccine crusade, and he engages in all the typical straw man ad hominem attacks of what I consider to be the intellectually weak in order to promote pro-vaccine. And one thing he put is that those who are anti-vax, their opinions are formed by YouTube, by social media, by Twitter, and yet here he is on Twitter trying to sell vaccines. And you wonder about the degree to which the medical profession and the pharmaceutical industry, how close are they knitted together? Given the fact that Pfizer was charged with bribing physicians and fraudulent marketing practices and withholding negative events from trials. And their clinicians, these are people in the medical industry working for these pharmaceutical companies, billions of dollars at stake. Globally, the pharmaceutical industry is over $1 trillion. A lot of money at stake. Anyway, uh, and Danny's saying, I've heard this as well. You get a fever, it's a sign that your body's fighting something off. And he's saying, don't worry until you get to 106, 108. I think that's higher than what I would say. 101, 102, that's a high fever. 106, 108, that's really high. And then, yeah, COVID, a lot of people made this connection, and I came across it ages ago. COVID, Certification of Vaccine Identification. He's got it as covert vaccine identification. Um, and then Wales saying 70 years from now, we'll learn the nature of the ingredients, or will we? And Well, there's an interesting conversation, and maybe I'll get into it in my Patreon piece. But if we look back 1800s, early 1900s, before the commercialization of the what used to be called apothecaries, prior to that, people didn't live as long. The average life expectancy has been on the increase. And there is a tendency amongst many, correlation, causation, to say because of advances in medical technology, in medical research, as we've seen advances in medical research, medical technology, we've seen an increase in longevity, in life expectancy. Ergo, A cause B. What's that old line about correlation does not necessarily prove causation? And that's something I think about. And I know that in the 1800s in Canada, a lot of people didn't have running water. They had an outhouse in the back. The degree of sanitation that exists in the world today is not what it was before. I wonder if the reason for increased longevity, to what degree, or what degree, if any, should we attribute it to things like public utilities, sanitation, clean water, and how much of it should be attributed to medical advancements. I do think medicine has helped, obviously. I think it has is a component, but now we're in the era of the pharmaceutical industry being worth trillions of dollars, and you always got to make more than the previous year. If I'm appointed as the CEO of some major pharmaceutical company, and they had $10 billion in revenue in 2025, and then I come along in 2026, and if revenue goes down, I'm going to lose my job. The expectation is 11 billion, 12 billion, 15 billion, 20 billion. You got to constantly be going up. Healthy people are not good for business. I haven't been to a doctor in 5 years, 5 plus. I'm not gonna, the pharmaceutical industry is not getting rich off me. Anyway, I like to end my videos. Anyone who's new, if you've stuck around this far, I like to end my videos with a blessing from the book of Numbers. These are words that Aaron spoke over God's covenant chosen people. And the words are these: May the Lord God, creator of all things, may he bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. And may the Lord God, creator of all things, grant you peace. Even in a crazy, upside down world where we're being programmed to think that gender is just a societal construct and you have to ask someone. I hate being asked, even in an email document, my pronouns. It's like, figure it out. Figure it out. I don't have to tell you. You know, we live in a crazy world right now, but you can find peace, you can find comfort, and by proclaiming God's word, by digging into it deeply. And I'm going to keep professing it, even if Bill C9 comes into effect and renders the Bible as hate speech. I don't care. I'm going to continue to profess Jesus as Lord. I'm going to continue to preach the wisdom that's contained within the wisdom of the ages. Uh, and Danny's telling me to stay healthy, that I will cost the healthcare system millions. I will cost the industrial medical complex money because I'm not getting treated. Um, I'm just reading. Anyway, I've read enough. in the comment field. You can check it out yourself later. God bless. And if you made it all the way here, like, share, subscribe, you know the YouTube drill, and look for my video that'll be dropping hopefully in the next few days, where a little more concise. God bless, and we'll see you all Wednesday for sure. All right. Talk to you later. And by the way, before I hit the end button, I like what Denny says. My pronouns are he, him, and two words. The second one is off. Anyway, God bless everyone. We'll talk to you later.